being able to say you're the CEO isn't nearly as cool as having a company that needs a CEO. And the idea that you've got this startup, you've got this idea, for it to become something that demands a full executive team is something that almost no companies ever get to. You look at the failure rates of startups, that pales in comparison to the startups that never get to the point of really needing a full staff. And when you start looking at what that really means, being a CEO doesn't mean a darn thing. It's just the way you fill out the Secretary of State forms. What really matters is that you create something that adds value to its audience and that you create something that can grow into something impressive.
On this episode of the Late Night Startup Show, we are sitting down with Ed Bolian of VINwiki. VINwiki is an app to where it invites users to curate information about their cars, whether it's history reports, damage reports, or just sharing the story of your car, where it's been, how many miles it's driven, where you're taking it to, what you're doing with it. It just invites all these users to come together as a community, all surrounding cars and everything, motor vehicles of transportation. Ed's a great guy. He comes from a sales background, working with a very high-end dealership here in Atlanta, Georgia. And before that, he started his own exotic car rental business. And then the car company, the dealership, pursued him because he did so well in his own business. So he knows business, he knows cars, he knows how to target a direct market, and he's very, very wise and smart when it comes to building an app that essentially was built to make no revenue, but he's making it make money by having a YouTube channel that has 645,000 subscribers in just over a year, which is insane. 20,000 followers on Facebook, on Instagram, probably Facebook too, but he has 40,000 followers on his own Instagram page. So that lets you know how important a personal brand is. We had a great conversation. He's an excellent mind. But before we get into it, of course, we have to thank our sponsors, RCR Video Marketing Group, an Atlanta-based multifaceted video production company creating compelling content to fast forward your business, and Digits in Motion. Rob from Digits in Motion is a great guy. Him and his team know exactly what they're doing when it comes to app development and websites and all things digital in motion. If you need help with apps and websites, contact Rob and Digits in Motion today. Now let's get into this conversation that we had with Ed about his cars and his business. It's a great conversation. Well, Ed, thank you so much for joining us, man. I've been keeping up with you guys on Instagram and all of that, and I love what you're doing as far as producing this content, and it's into a direct market, and you're doing it very, very successfully. So just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and now what VINwiki is and everything you're doing with VINwiki.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Ed Bolian. I grew up not far from here in Beaufort, Georgia. Went to Georgia Tech, and while I was there, I actually started an exotic car rental company back in 2006. When that was, you could pretty much get a crazy big exotic car loan by fogging a mirror. That's why we had such a financial meltdown in 08 and 09. And after that, I was being courted by various exotic car dealerships to come and sell cars there, and ended up selling cars at Lamborghini Atlanta for about 6 years. Had a lot of fun there, but got kind of tired of the car salesman hours. But left really not really knowing what was going to be next. I mean, I made it a habit of getting a lot of my entrepreneurial friends together on at least a quarterly basis just to spitball ideas around, just have people from different backgrounds, different skill sets and things like that. And we did one around the end of 2015 into 16, and VINwiki was one of the ideas we discussed. And it was really something that was based on a lot of the things I've done in selling cars, owning cars, kind of curating the history of my cars, apart from what you'd find on like Carfax or AutoCheck. So the way we describe the VINwiki app is that it's a crowdsourced vehicle history reporting platform, like a social version of Carfax, and not really designed to be Facebook for your car, but designed to be a way for someone to properly curate the history of a car they know something about, whether the owner or a third party, and then make that available to the public to add value and kind of community and let it be community officiated like a wiki would be.
Okay.
And so we launched the app in the middle of 2016, and it did great. You know, I had thought as we devised the idea of it that like a really active VINwiki user might post once a day or a few times a week, and because that was kind of what it was based on. Like I made a list of all the VINs of all my cars and put it on my website, and that was awesome because it gave me this kind of broader view of what was happening to the cars that I had. And so when I would sell them, which is a way, generally that's kind of where the tie gets cut. Like you don't know what happens to the car after that. And so when that would happen, I would end up, getting emailed by whoever buys the car, wherever it ends up. And I found out a bunch of really cool stuff. Like one of my Land Rovers had been exported to Russia. One went to Puerto Rico. One of the Gallardos got exported to Hong Kong. One of the Ferraris got crashed. I mean, so a lot of really cool stuff that you normally wouldn't be able to find out. And so I thought that we'd build VINwiki in a way that would allow people to do that, to kind of harness the power of exposing their attachment to a car to a broader audience. And it very much does that. But we also saw that it really became like the world's best car spotting app. Yeah. Because not only could you record, hey, I saw this car at this date at this restaurant or whatever you did, but then you could see, all right, well, have any of my friends seen that car? What else shows up in the app? And people just started discovering lots of really, really interesting and novel things. And
what's the benefit of being able to report where you see that car at?
Well, there's enthusiasts for every type of genre, every type of thing. And exotic car enthusiasts, they can easily post a picture on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. But as they see the car grow or accumulate miles or get modified or change hands or be used in some interesting way in a movie or, repossessed and sold at a U.S. Marshal auction. I mean, all these things happen, and being able to learn more when you post a picture like that on social media is a pretty big draw. So we let anyone post information to any car by its VIN or by its license plate. So sometimes it comes from owners, sometimes it comes from dealers, sometimes it comes from like manufacturer or institutional sources, but generally it's from just people who see a cool car, want to post something, and it's kind of the less traditional type of information that you normally find.
Okay. It sounds like it's like a very specific Facebook group in a sense, to where all the guys are talking about and girls are talking about cars and details and posting pictures about it. And right before we started, we were talking about the red camera that we have, and there is a redforum.com, and one of the sections in that forum is just a bunch of owners saying, hey, took my camera out on this shoot, my camera has this many hours on it. So it's very similar as building that community around general object in a sense, right? With a vehicle. So you came out with the app in 2016. Yeah. How's it? I assume it's kind of skyrocketed for a second. Has it plateaued? How's it performed to date?
Anytime you launch a tech startup, it's a very strange road ahead of you. And I had absolutely no experience in that or anything like that. I'm not a technical guy. I'm not out there coding at night trying to fix bugs. But fortunately, I had a good group of developer friends that were interested in building this for equity, and so we were able to launch a pretty production ready product from day one. And that was really the kind of the saving grace, because anytime you have this kind of side hustle project, which it was for them, it's something that you never know exactly how it's going to grow, what trajectory it's going to take, and your hope is always that there's some crazy butterfly effect that you just tap the first domino and amazing things happen. But that's not really the way that a lot of this stuff works. It ends up being quite a grind. And so for the first year, we really were just trying to evangelize the concept, go to car shows, go to events, talk to users, and understand exactly how they liked to use the app, and that worked well.
Customers in a sense.
Exactly, And so just a lot of customer discovery, a lot of user behavior analysis, and just trying to figure out what kind of tweaks we needed to make. And obviously the monster in the closet for any new business is, how do I market? And we could figure out that, look, if I go to a car show and I say, if you download my app and make 10 posts, I'll give you a t-shirt, I can make that happen as much as I want to. But if I want to spend $4 or $5 for each user acquisition for an app that fundamentally doesn't make money, no, I don't have $500,000 for our first 100,000 users. And it was very deliberate on our part not to monetize it at all or too early, because it kind of muddies the process, and we wanted it to be a very genuine, very authentic product that reflects our attitude towards car ownership, that's empowering and broadening the reach of an owner or an enthusiast. And so I was pleased with that decision, but obviously you've only got so much runway when you launch something like this. And so we had a lot of success in YouTube video related marketing from my background in car sales. I had a lot of friends that were automotive YouTubers, and I knew that they somehow made a living doing that and were broadening their reach and exposing a lot of products, getting product sponsorships and stuff like that. And so when I would let one of them drive one of my cars and do like a YouTube car review or whatever in it, and they would mention VINwiki, we would have a tremendous amount of new growth. Okay. And so I knew that the automotive consuming audience of YouTube was like a great audience to translate into our app, and that we could probably see some pretty good conversion there of whatever audience you could build in the YouTube platform coming on and becoming an asset to us in our native app. And so the problem is, well, how do I get a bunch of views on YouTube? Because I didn't have a clue at all. And so in the middle of 2017, we were, kind of at this point, we had like 5,000 really passionate, really active users, which generated a tremendous amount of great content. But that's not enough
active
to be
subscribers.
No, to users in our app.
Okay.
We hadn't started the YouTube channel yet. And I was thinking, well, what do we do to broaden this? Because I can't necessarily afford to just let it grow at this kind of pace. You know, it's like 1 or 2% a week.
Yeah.
Well, then we decided that let's see what we could do on YouTube. And my idea really was just to build a series of me and my friends sitting around in our warehouse telling car stories, and then give that content to someone that already had an audience and let them somehow expose that to the world. I would just benefit from the traffic to the app because that's all I thought I had available to care about. And it was interesting because, I mean, I had a dozen friends with tremendous automotive followings that are starving for content because of the demand for the YouTube algorithms to constantly publish every single day.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is great. I'm just going to hand you another show. You can release it however frequency you want, once a week, once a day. I don't really care. If it works, I'll give you more. If you don't like it, you don't have to keep doing it. It was like I felt like a pretty legit and easy to accept proposal. But all of them said no, categorically. They just said, and I have come to understand since then that the way YouTube offers their analytics, it's very descriptive rather than being prescriptive. Like you can only really arrive at one of two conclusions. Should I keep doing what I did yesterday, or should I try to do something different?
Okay.
And generally, if you're having enough success to not have another job, your decision is going to be do what I did yesterday as closely as possible, and let's just see what happens.
Yeah.
And what will generally happen is about the same result as you saw yesterday. And so they all said no. And I was like, well, I mean, I want it out there. We made it. And I had a bunch of friends come out. We sat around in my warehouse having pizza and beer and just told car stories all day. And we shot the first 25 of them in a day.
Wow.
And a friend of mine that had a background in video production and everything said he would edit them and help us to release them. And he did a brilliant job. Built our intro, our outro, our template, everything just came out way better than I ever would have imagined. Because if it had just been up to me, it would have been like barely a camera in front facing mode, just, on a phone trying to figure out what to do. So he did that, and I was like, all right, let's think if we get like 2,000 views per video, like 50,000 views across the whole channel, we'll decide to redo this.
Yeah.
And turned out we got about 800, 900,000 views in that first month, releasing the content every day. And I remember when I told him, he's like, well, how often do you want to release? He's like, 1 or 2 a week. And I'm like, no, every day. If this works, I want to do it I want to lean in as much as we can. If it doesn't, like I want to be over it and on to the next thing, because we got to figure out ways to grow. And of course, we saw just tremendous conversion of new subscribers and viewers into the app users. And I guess in some ways, the rest is history.
Wow. Okay. And now you have 644,922 followers.
Give or take, right?
Yeah, give or take. I wrote it down. So it's going up or down, as we speak, probably. So let's go back a little bit, though, because it sounds like you had the idea for the app and built the app knowing it wasn't going to be a source of revenue, right? It's a free platform for people to communicate about cars.
It is. And we always understood that the idea of like VINwiki as a consumer engagement tool was a better special sauce to exist on top of a larger automotive data set than for us to build out like our own proprietary full stack of, data and information from all types of sources for cars. We knew that we offered something that no one else did, but trying to replicate everything else doesn't really make sense. Like at the end of the day, VINwiki is unsurprisingly an acquisition play. It's something where we've constantly from day one been approached by different automotive companies that understand, like we have the crash data, we have the police reports, we have the dealer subscriptions, we have all these things, but what we don't have is a great way for you to tell me about your car. And we want that, but the idea of spending all the time and effort that we've done to build up that audience into something that's substantial enough to, be buyable at critical mass is something that they seem to find interesting. And so I don't know when we'll agree to those types of offers, but, we constantly have those types of discussions.
And was that the intent going in then when you came up with the idea?
You're kind of throwing darts in the dark when you start a tech company, you never know exactly what it's going to build into. I mean, it could always be that we decide to roll out our own ad platform and that becomes a sufficient amount of revenue. But when you look at the most efficiently monetized social apps, they're only generating $5 to $10 per user per year in revenue. And while certainly that's valuable and worthwhile, there's only so much you can really do. And we certainly wouldn't have started from that type of efficient monetization. And so our goal was to leave it as just an ad-free environment. And the YouTube stuff was just a godsend because it allows us to create enough revenue to keep the servers spinning without having to make that decision right now as the app continues to grow and sort of become whatever it can be.
Okay. So you're making the YouTube videos and that's constantly bringing people to your app and recruiting new users and all that. You put out the first 25, I guess, one day after another. Now, what about going forward? What do you do now to keep content?
The same thing. Yeah. So we take the weekends off, but every weekday we release a video. At first I was, sometimes we take holidays off or something like that, but we found that holidays they could just as easily be way better or they could be way worse. You just never really know. And so I've been extremely pleased with how it's all played out, and it's been amazing. So the friend that edited the first 25 of them saw the writing on the wall very, very quickly that at some point this is going to become someone's full-time job. And he has a very legitimate filmmaking career and does all the big production stuff that happens here in Atlanta. And so he did not want that to be him. And I got that. I mean, I understood because it's one of these things that for anybody that wants to become a professional YouTuber or a professional influencer or whatever in the world that means, and you're going to have to produce so much content, like the chance to do so as a full-time job demands that you treat it as a full-time job long before it financially justifies that. Yeah. And you've got to decide, I'm going to keep producing this content. I'm going to keep, screaming into the void, hoping that someone eventually hears me and I develop an audience that can support the habit. And fortunately for us, even without money coming in from YouTube, it very immediately was directing enough traffic into our app to make that worthwhile. And so I had to make the decision that even without his interest in participating on an ongoing basis, again, which I can't blame him for, I've got to figure out a way to do it. And, YouTube there's kind of a tried and tested opportunity to sell sponsorships. And so we got approached by a lot of different products, companies, whatever, that wanted to kind of piggyback on our viewership to sponsor things. So I had a $5,000 sponsor for our second month. And then I was like, well, I don't have a filmmaker, but I got to figure out a way to do it. So I just used that to buy some equipment and generally replicate his setup enough to be able to move forward. And so there's 25 awesome VINwiki car stories. Then there's about 10 to 20 just utter abysmal failures. Yeah. And those are the ones that I did. And I would render it out at the, complete wrong way, or upload it and release it 5 minutes late because I didn't configure everything right, or, just the lighting would be totally off, or the audio would be just as echoey and miserable. And we were shooting these things in my 4,000 square foot warehouse, steel walls, steel ceiling. I mean, echo factory, no climate control. And the neighbors pumped waste oil into from these trucks from fast food restaurants. So I'd have to go over there and knock on the wall and be like, well, y'all just shut up for 10 minutes so I can make a video. And
then you realize what all goes into video production.
It's
a nightmare.
It's exactly. And so I got sick of it one day, and I just I can't keep doing it. I had some high profile race car driver in telling car stories, and I thanked him, let him go. And then I went in there and spent all night tearing a wall out of the built out offices that were part of our warehouse, none of which were big enough to really have the room we needed to have a studio. And which is the biggest air quote thing in the world, studio for VINwiki. But the place where we would shoot these videos, and I didn't get landlord permission, and I just tore down the walls and tinted it off and boarded up the windows and made it look like the same way. So I measured things and moved it in there, and nobody really noticed. Fortunately, we kind of replicated the same backdrop that we had in the warehouse, and then just shot it in a much more comfortable place. So that was an improvement because I was miserable at doing the audio engineering to deal with the echo and everything else, but it worked.
So is it still just guys sitting around telling car stories? That's every episode.
That's
okay.
It,
Man, that's That's got to be nice though to do the same thing over and over, because it feels like just your initial idea to go to YouTube with is stuck.
It did, yeah. I mean, fortunately, you kind of expect to have to iterate through some stuff and try to figure out exactly what makes sense for your platform. And this has worked great. We constantly think about what an additional show or some new idea or whatever else we might want to do. But this works awesome, and there's no shortage of car stories. The way I've ended up setting it up is that I'll tell one a week, and then on the other 4 days I'll have guests that come in, and usually they'll come into our studio and shoot 5, 6, 7 car stories, and then I'll release them over a few weeks.
Okay,
and so
gotcha.
I think right now I've got 60 or 70 shot that we haven't released yet. Okay. And we're about to release, I think, our 500th, but of course that's 90 some odd that I've done of mine, and I've had a lot of fun days in the car business, but I got to go out and make some more, I suppose.
Yeah, I hear you. So is YouTube taking up the main part of your day, or like 90% of your time? How are you managing YouTube and bringing in those sponsorships and that ad revenue, but at the same time focusing on the app and making that run smoothly?
So fortunately, it's not like I was a single person startup. So I had a technical team that was willing to help and support on the app side, and they built it into something that is honestly pretty self-sustaining. It's got its bugs, everything does, but we're in the process of a 2.0 release of it that is done with them and some outsourcing. And so that's going to put us in a great position to, have a better product there. And that's done generally apart from anything other than my 30,000 foot view.
Okay.
So that's terrific. So generally my hat's mostly just being sort of not really a CEO, but a CMO, just focusing on the marketing of how we evangelize this concept and getting it out there into the world. And so the way we do that is YouTube. So as embarrassing and as it is to say it out loud, I think I am a full-time YouTuber.
Yeah.
And that is working exceptionally well as a technologist or entrepreneur.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways to make revenue off of YouTube, with the ads, and then also, like you said, with sponsorships and sponsoring such a niche audience too. Right. I mean, it's a direct connection to your consumers,
and it's so much time that you're in front of someone. So even though obviously it is a content marketing strategy for the VINwiki app. Yeah. It's not designed to be a VINwiki commercial for 5 to 12 minutes every day that we release a story. It's designed to be something that's, clearly related to VINwiki. And our goal is for each story, each video to be kind of like a blown up post. So a VINwiki post can contain some combination of a picture, some text, a date, mileage, location, stuff like that. And if you said, all right, this is the day that I bought this Lamborghini from a prostitute, and this is the 10-minute version of me telling that story, they're related. It points to that, and we'll do screenshots and things like that of the app in the video. So it works very, very well for that.
Totally.
But it's also about trying to, make sure that it's something that the storytellers are really proud of, and that it just gets that broadened reach.
Yeah. I love what you said, though, about you didn't see yourself as the CEO. You had very quickly realized you had to be the CMO. And hearing that, I'm that's the mistake that new entrepreneurs make. They wear the CEO as a badge of honor. I'm a CEO now of this new tech startup. Or even if it's a cupcake business, they like the letter CEO. Right. But when you're first starting out, you have to figure out marketing first and foremost, right?
Right. We all have that image of Justin Timberlake talking in The Social Network about, that business card that says CEO on it. And it's really not that. It's, being able to say you're the CEO isn't nearly as cool as having a company that needs a CEO. And the idea that you've got this startup, you've got this idea, for it to become something that demands a full executive team is something that almost no companies ever get to. You look at the failure rates of startups, that pales in comparison to the startups that never get to the point of really needing a full staff. Yeah. And when you start looking at what that really means, being a CEO doesn't mean a darn thing. Yeah. It's just the way you fill out the Secretary of State forms. What really matters is that you create something that adds value to its audience, and that you create something that can grow into something impressive.
That's an excellent point. But I want to go all the way back to when you guys are meeting and talking about ideas, because I mean, I gotta admit, I'm in a few like entrepreneurship breakfast communities and like other meetings that we go to. And it's more of like, we just sit down and talk if we have questions or issues, or like, hey, how would you handle this? Kind of advice driven, but from telling from own experience.
For sure.
It's not like a Q&A. But I haven't been to a meeting to where you sat down and just throw out random ideas. So was that how the meeting always was?
In general, yeah, it would just be, we'd kind of spend some time, and there was enough background that most of the people, we didn't have to spend a lot of time on introductions. Like, even though there were all like degrees of separation between each of the people in the group, there was enough of a common bond to say, all right, if you're in this room, you're qualified to contribute, and that shouldn't be in question. What we're here for is to decide if there's anything out there on the table that we could collectively pool our resources behind and create a better outcome than any of us could alone.
Yeah.
And, one casualty of this like incubator, startup hub world that we now live in, where in every city there's 2 or 3 great places for a startup to exist and sort of be incubated or encouraged, like Atlanta Tech Village or Switchyards here in Atlanta. Yeah. Those are brilliant places, and they are easy ways to deploy an idea. The problem is sometimes they're too easy, and they don't require as much vetting and as much kind of really deciding, is this the best use of our time? Because before too long, you can have legal formation and a hot desk or an office, and the feeling like, I just started a company, when it was really like, did you have an idea that really merits a company behind it? Or did you have a side project that ought to just have its own Instagram page?
Yeah.
And neither's correct or incorrect. It's just a matter of, we're probably missing some of the banging your head against the wall trying to figure out what the real product market fit is, and if there's actually a real problem that you're trying to solve. Yeah. And the environments like you're talking about, where you can have these meetups, these things, those are extremely valuable. And the more time that you can spend there, the less time you're going to spend tripping over yourself because of some fake momentum that you were able to get pushed behind you.
Yeah.
And that's what this was for me. It was those kind of chances to say, we all have entrepreneurial dreams. We all feel like we have entrepreneurial skills, but that doesn't mean that any of us at the moment have a great entrepreneurial idea. Totally. And, one of the things that you learn immediately in any of these spaces, and to me, that was the most valuable lesson, is forget about intellectual property. Nobody cares how good your idea is. Yeah. All that matters is how you can execute on it. Yeah. And so people always come into these meetings like they're real cagey, like it's something in the automotive data space, and that they're all cryptic, as though they got to open up a trench coat and show you like their wares. And that's not it. Like, that's not what we need to be doing. What you need to say is, this is it. Would you use this? Not some roundabout version of what I think this might become. Would you actually download this app, input information about your car, talk to things? And what we found, honestly, was that the answer might not be yes enough for this to be the next Twitter, but it could absolutely be yes enough to be the next step, as automotive forums got replaced by Facebook groups that might now become something like VINwiki. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing, is it's a lot stickier than that. And the UX is, we're not trying, fortunately, to compete with Facebook and everything else, but we're trying to build something that is valuable. And I think we've done that.
Yeah, I think so. But back to the co-working spaces, because I haven't really thought about this, but it sounds like if you have a desk at a co-working space, you can very easily deceive yourself into thinking you've built something that you actually haven't. Is that like, you kind of were going along those lines? I kind of want to just dive into that a little more.
They had a big thing at Tech Village where somebody from the Secretary of State's office started walking through and giving everybody fines because nobody had business licenses.
Oh, wow.
Because they just hadn't bothered, because they had desks. Why do I need a business? I got a shirt that says my company name on it. What does a business license have to do with that? And
so they came in and just started writing fines?
Yeah, just started writing fines. And it's not a big fine. They didn't get their $18, whatever. And so it was like, it's one of those things where it's great to be easy to start a company, because there's a lot of stuff. Nobody's good at all this stuff. And nobody wants to go out and pay a lawyer $5,000 to properly set up every aspect of their business. But unless you want to spend a lot of time that has nothing to do with your actual product, you got to either pay for it or do it or have somebody else do it.
Yeah.
And so one of the people that was always in this group was one of my lawyers, and he was a great friend and continues to be. And just having somebody say, all right, I can handle this part, and an accountant to say, look, don't worry about this. Like, let's just make sure that whatever we need to do for the idea is there. Like, that's what was really valuable. And just creating this environment where there aren't bad ideas, but we're also not going to let a bad idea dominate discussion for too long.
Yeah.
And so, you go to these pitch events and things like that, and it's like, it's kind of like, who told you like this was worth spending the last year of your life building that? And you need to have people in your life that are willing to say, I don't think that's a good idea. And if it's not, say, but I have this idea. Would you like to help with it? So, well, maybe, but this seems like a whole, and just finding ways to shore up all these issues as quickly as possible is what allows you to deploy fast, build fast, break things, and everything we kind of talk about as mantra.
Yeah, because as entrepreneurs, we're going to come up with ideas that we think are great and that other people would see as bad. And even as entrepreneurs, we're so married to the idea that some of us still follow through with it.
Right.
And then realize that,
maybe
those people are right.
Yeah.
But that's, just the name of the game. And honestly, I think that's a beautiful thing about being an entrepreneur is you get to experience that moment. But so has cars always been your passion? Like,
not really. I didn't grow up in like a car loving family. The story I actually told this week was about the guy that, kind of introduced me to cars. He was a childhood best friend, and unfortunately he passed away a few years later. But it was like you kind of have that indoctrination into whatever the field becomes, and sometimes it's better to come to it more late in life. It was really right when I could drive. We started to go out and conning people into letting us test drive exotic cars at dealerships and stuff like that. But no cars. I didn't grow up loving cars, but I certainly do now, and it's become the lens I see the world through.
Okay. Talk to me about this world record that you hold. Tell me that story.
So back in 2013, we set the world record for the Cannonball run. We drove from New York to Los Angeles in 28 hours, 50 minutes. And it was something I'd learned about 10 years prior to that. I did it when I was 28. And so I was in high school. I learned what Cannonball was and just all the amazing automotive history that was sort of behind it. And that it wasn't just this goofy movie from the 80s. It was a real thing that these guys did in the 1970s, organized by Brock Yates and Steve Smith from Car and Driver magazine. Wow. And the fact that these guys were crazy enough to say, look, why don't we just get the fastest cars we can, get some people who are cool, and we're just going to go start in New York and race to LA and just see what happens.
Yeah.
And, this was a very different political time than I encountered, as I thought, well, hey, that's an awesome thing that I'd like to attach my name to. And it kind of checks a lot of the boxes in terms of how I view the automotive hobby. Like, there's problem solving, there's logistics, there's on-road use of a car, there's the outfitting of a car and what it's going to take, and the countermeasures that have to be deployed to avoid encounters with law enforcement. And then just, how do you prove it? How do you do it? Because as a high schooler, I actually did a research project on automotive journalism, and I interviewed Brock Yates of Car and Driver magazine. Back then he was still working there. He died in 2016 after a 12-year bout with Alzheimer's. But he had released a book that said, this is what we did. These are some excerpts and some stories and some things like that. It was just epic. And I loved the book. And I called him to interview, and he had said at the end of the book that, look, this can't be done any faster now. There's twice as many cops, twice as many people on the road. The population in the U.S. has grown by so much that it can't be done. And I told him, hey, one day I really want to do this. And he's cordial. And I was like, good luck, kid. And unfortunately, he had regressed so much in the Alzheimer's that by the time we did it, he was kind of unavailable to comment on it. But I did still make a trip up to New York to the rest home where he was, and I got to sit there and watch a football game with him. And I told him what happened, even if he didn't fully understand.
Yeah.
But it was one of these things that when you find a goal, everything about the pursuit of a record like that or an idea like that is entrepreneurial. Yeah. There's no real payoff. Like, you don't make money from holding the Cannonball world record, but you do learn a lot, and certainly it's a useful resume item. But everything you have to figure out, like, how are we going to pay for this? What is it going to be? How is it going to come together? What are the risks? What are the obstacles that I've got to overcome that all have to be managed the same way a startup has to be done? And so I didn't have as much to show for it other than a cool car that I'll never want to sell, but it was a great thing.
Well, it's a way to get impressions, to put it in like social media terms, right? You go and do all these things, not necessarily to make money off of it, but it's, you get your name out there. There's eyeballs looking at you. You make impressions just as if you post on social, scrolling through. You want to be there. You want to be present.
For sure. And now that I have, one of those things I said I'd never do is start like some unmonetizable tech company.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's exactly what I did. And then one of the other things, I'm like, I'm never going to try to be some darn social media influencer. And then
that's what. Well, I got to say, you saying that you're not passionate about cars, it does not make sense after that story you just told, because you went all the way back to high school about reading a magazine and about cars. So it sounds like it has to be your passion.
It is the passion now. I just didn't come from that initially. And
gotcha.
So it's it definitely is the dyed in the wool thing now. But yeah, you're right. The goal is obviously with whatever concept you're trying to champion, whatever message you want to put out there into the world, is to get the impressions, to get it in front of as many eyeballs as possible. And I think last year people spent 1,200 years watching VINwiki car stories. Wow. And you look at some of these statistics, it was like 101 or 102 million views. It's like, wow, like there's a tremendous amount of consumption that happens. And in the noise that exists in the world of social media, it's what I want to do is make sure that whatever we provide in terms of an entertainment product or whatever you'd like to call it, is that this is something that is hitting hard, to the point. There's no fluff, things like that. Like we don't stretch something into 14 minutes if 7 will do. And the goal is just hopefully that it's something satisfying enough that these guys just binge through them. And that's what we've seen happen, is that they watch a lot of them at a time.
Gotcha.
We hope so.
Just open up the playlist and let it play through. Yeah,
that's the idea.
Yeah. So you said that you never thought you would be the guy making social media posts and making videos and all that for your business. So speak to that entrepreneur that thinks that they don't have time, right? Because they built their product or their app or their service, and they're trying to grow the company, so they don't have time to do video. Because you're doing it yourself, you've jumped in and done it yourself. You don't always have to hire a video production company like us, which I think is the best way to see the benefit of video, is to at least start doing it.
Right? Because you've got to prototype something. Yeah. And it's the same way you're going to create an MVP app. It's the same way you're going to say, all right, what is the easiest way for me to figure out if this can work? And it's got to be legitimate enough and polished enough that that's not the objection, but is the type of content I can produce worth replicating? And we found very immediately that it was. But I've advised people come to me all the time, like, how do I use YouTube to grow my company? I'm like, I don't even know how it grows mine, but it works. But it works because of consistency. It works because we found the right complementary idea. Like a friend of mine is a real estate agent. And, for a real estate agent, like anything else, SEO is huge. And if you want to build SEO today, it is video content. Yeah. And wherever you're releasing it, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, making sure that it gets out there packaged in the right way is the secret. And so he's been going around talking about different aspects of how you sell a house in the same way that I used to do with cars. Like, as I was selling cars, I would make blog posts, which were at the time the best SEO thing you could do, and have each of them kind of reflect some question someone would probably ask through the research process to see what it was what they wanted to do in terms of buying an exotic car. And those would funnel people towards me, and therefore just create, free marketing. Yeah.
So when you say have the look for the platform, what do you mean by that?
Well, there's always going to be something complementary to whatever your core business is that you use your marketing to point to. Like, if I just reposted VINwiki posts on Instagram, that's exactly what I'm essentially trying not to have someone do. I don't want them just to post on Instagram. I want them to push it towards the app.
Okay.
So I want them to go there to consume it. Whereas if I post a really cool car picture on Instagram, well, that says, all right, this is a car related brand. These are authentic car guys, but it doesn't necessarily say what I'm about.
Yeah.
So in our case, posting a longer form version of what might be boiled down into a proper VINwiki post became the perfect marketing effort for us. It was sufficiently entertaining in its own right, the same way that a picture of a new Ferrari LaFerrari would be on Instagram, but it has the right conversion.
Yeah.
Now, it's a lot more effort than some of that, but at the same time, it does just work. So, like, for instance, you have this amazing video setup here, and you're using it for a podcast. So you're essentially showing off my professional services could be used to deliver this type of product that might be more central to what you're doing. And so there's a lot of people that become experts or influencers or whatever they want to consider themselves in an industry, and a podcast is a much more useful thing, but they don't want to deal with everything that goes with it.
Yeah.
And the ability to, cross promote on different platforms and things like that through video is obviously huge.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you mentioned you have to come to the conclusion, is the content that you're creating worth duplicating? But I think a lot of people would put out one episode of something or one video and then say, oh, I didn't get engagement, and then stop.
Right.
So like, how do you decide when to evaluate if it's worth duplicating?
Right. So we started releasing the videos at the end of July in 2017. And it really wasn't until at least November, maybe early December, before I realized like this is absolutely going to be a huge part of the ongoing and long-term growth of our company. Now, fortunately, and this was, a gift to my short attention span, was we immediately saw a lot of new users. We saw growth that we couldn't replicate from any other marketing effort for that kind of essentially zero investment at that point through the app. And so it was great in that regard. So you want to see something that is that glimmer of hope, but don't feel like it's just that you're so close that to whatever the eventual vision of what this is, that it's just going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
It's going to take a grind, and it's going to take a lot more work than you want it to. And like I said, you've got to treat it like a full-time job before it can become your full-time job. And most people can't. I mean, like, it takes an insane amount of time. Like, that it's, for every minute of high quality video you want to produce, it's at least an hour of effort. Yeah. And for you, it's probably, half of what it is per quality for me, but it takes me an eternity, a long time to do this. Yeah. And as a, one-man show on that front, like, it's a lot, but it became worth it. And so the hope is that eventually it does. And that's the nature of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So is YouTube your main focus then? I mean, I know you got close to 20,000 followers on Instagram, but are you doing anything to try to create revenue through Instagram, or that's just kind of brand recognition? And
unless your last name's Kardashian, I'm not even sure that's a real thing. Like, I don't know how you create enough revenue. I mean, when you think about the number of impressions that I can achieve on Instagram, now obviously the audience pales in comparison, but follower for follower, like, it's just not there. Yeah. I applaud anyone who can, and I'm not saying like I am in a position to be critical of anybody's approach to social media, because I don't have the slightest clue, but I found that to be the case. Now, obviously right now you can build a lot natively in Instagram TV and Facebook and all the other things that they're doing. So I think the opportunity there in video content and things like that is huge. And we're still trying to explore exactly how that fits in with what we're doing here at VINwiki. But I don't know. I mean, I suppose the lesson that I've learned is that regardless of what your core competency is or your core business is, there is a thing that will be that perfect solution to your marketing that exists somewhere in the world of social media, because it's an unignorable monster that you've got to tame in some way. Yeah. And for us, it was this. I don't think that's the broad prescription solution, but I think there is a thing out there that will work.
But the focus should be video for most people.
For maybe, I would say, for some people, it's a clothing brand that relates to it. And for some people, it might be guest writing magazine articles or blog posts or something like that. For some people, it may be paying influencers. Like, Dollar Shave Club is our current sponsor. Like, they don't do any of their own like content production. They just sponsor content producers. And so they decided that is their best way in. Yeah. And good for them. It works great. I guess it gets people, paying $5 a month for razors. Yeah. Awesome. But what you want to make sure is that you're just opening your mind enough to not thinking like, all right, just because YouTube worked for Ed or podcast work or whatever, like I need to do that. No, you need to look at whatever expresses the most authentic version of your product to the world that might be interested in learning more about it. And for us, it's that. And I'm very pleased to have found it without too many bumps in the road. But if you don't open yourself up to the chance to learn about enough and really experiment enough, you're not going to find that thing that can be so sustaining.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. What's been your biggest struggle so far building this app and even the YouTube channel?
It's anytime you set out on this road, like you see an encouragement and then you see a drop and you see something that just comes in and hits you. And we've had data issues, we've had server issues, we've had team issues, we've had every type of early stage startup company issue that you could have. I really think, for us, the biggest issue is really where we're at right now. We've got a great user audience and pretty good engagement. Like we know that our app needs tweaks and things like that. We got over 150,000 users in our app, and they like it, they engage with it, they use it. But we're at that tipping point, I hope, or getting closer to it, where we transition from this kind of cult-like thing of people who care about and understand the idea to a more broad appeal and utility. And I don't necessarily know what it's going to take to kick us off that ledge and get us to that next point where we have consistent growth, which is very unique, because that's the strange reality when you have success in marketing, not in virality.
Yeah.
And so we have viral videos. We don't have a viral app. We have an app that rewards people and that they like once they find it.
Yeah.
But it's honestly not at a point that it's very easy for one of the users to say, all right, I need to expose this to my 10 friends, and they need to expose that to their 10 friends. Like that's when you really go nuts from an app perspective. We'll get there at some point as we do some polishing and end up with ultimately a better product. But since we have good marketing, we have linear growth. You never see that out of an early stage tech startup. It's either flat or it's slowly dying or it's hockey stick growing. And we haven't gotten there yet, but we have growth. And so this newly exposed audience is taxing our servers, making my life a lot more expensive, but not necessarily getting us to the point where we're just gangbusters and breaking stuff too fast.
Yeah. So how do you prepare for, one viral video? Because, there's obviously a huge technical back end to the app, and say one of your videos goes viral and 100,000 new users come down and download the app. Does that affect your servers? Or? Well,
what we find is that doesn't really happen. Successful marketing will only result in linear growth.
Okay.
In my experience, no, I mean, if you when you have consistent content production, certainly if you have like an amazing Kickstarter campaign and video, that could result in this unique growth. That's an X4Y direct correlation, marketing to growth effect.
Okay.
What we see is that, but it's over and over consistent. And because of the way we produce content, it's not really driven by who is the storyteller or exactly what the story is about. We get a pretty consistent number of views on a daily basis, and that increases very slowly. You learn a lot about YouTube, that subscribers don't really mean anything. It's all about some combination of views and watch time and ad rates and junk like that. So it's we're in kind of a place where we want to prepare ourselves for what that is, but I don't yet know what's going to be the trigger or the number of users where the experience kind of changes.
Gotcha.
So keep pushing.
So I assume you're kind of the face of the brand, the one that's known on YouTube and all that. The reason I say that is because, if I'm not mistaken, your personal Instagram has more followers than the VINwiki Instagram.
It does, yeah. And I've been putting content on Instagram personally for much longer.
So how much does your personal brand mean in as far as VINwiki's growth?
Well, I think of the videos that we produce, about 500 videos, and about 90, some odd of them are mine. And I think that's probably responsible for, I would guess, I'd have to look, probably 30 to 40% of the views. So mine average very slightly better than the average, but we've had plenty of amazing storytellers. And so in terms of me being what the VINwiki YouTube channel is, I'm not sure that's necessarily an accurate deduction, but very significantly, VINwiki is grown out of the way I look at the market for cars. The successes that I've had in owning cars, buying cars, selling cars, enhancing the history of cars through taking them on some epic drive or whatever the case may be. All of those things have happened very organically from who I am becoming part of what the app is. And I think that's the best role a founder could be, because it allows me to truly understand what I want that to become. Now, one thing I've also learned about myself is that I'm very much a 0 to X entrepreneur than an X to Y entrepreneur. So the person that makes something exist that didn't exist or leads that effort is very different than the approach that it takes to take something that exists and make it perfect.
Okay.
I'm not that much of a perfectionist. I'm very much a guy. I want to run fast, run into stuff, and see what sticks, rather than make so precise and careful calculations that this is exactly the right move at this right time.
Yeah.
If I had, I don't know that I would have put as much effort into the channel or into the way that, you know, some of the parts of the app work, but I like where it's become. And so, you know, authenticity is that word that gets thrown around. And I hope we come off as authentic, because it is very much based on things that I did before this happened. And I believe that people can benefit from, you know, using some of those things in their daily interactions with cars. But until then, you know, you just never know. Yeah.
Do you think there's a huge difference or benefit between going from 0 to X and versus X and Y, or striving for perfection? Like, can someone who's a perfectionist strive for perfection and put out content that way? Or does that perfectionist have to give up the strive for perfection?
They just have to understand how the way that they are wired impacts what it makes it easier or harder for them to do. And there's nothing that anybody cannot do. There are things that are going to be easier for some and harder for others.
So do you sorry to interrupt, do you then focus on what's easier to do and kind of like expanding that and exploring that? Or do you change your focus too on what's harder and try to make what's harder easier?
So when I set out to set the Cannonball record, I understood that traffic, accidents, weather, police, the car braking, all the things. I identified the liabilities before I set out on developing my strategy.
Okay.
If I had approached it differently and said, like, I'm so brand loyal to this manufacturer, or this is the day I have to go on because it's a special day in history, or whatever the case may be, if I start with something that should be a response to the risks, then I increase the chances of not being successful. In the same way, if I set out to try something with a company, or I set out to try something from a marketing perspective, and I don't first look at what's going to keep me from being successful at that, I just start thinking like, I want to be a famous YouTuber. Okay, well, that is something that could very well stand in the way of delivering the message that most effectively directs people to your app, which is fundamentally the goal in our case. And so, or if like, I have to own this car, or I have to have this amount of immediate revenue right now in order to pay my bills. Those are all very justifiable goals. It's all part of what we do in business and in life. But what it can do is cloud our judgment and blur our vision in terms of what the best legitimate strategy is to achieve this goal. And so if somebody sets out because of something they want to start, something they want to do, something they want to be, and they don't first look at, well, what is it about the way I see the world, the way I do things, the way I know this to exist that's going to keep me from that, then you're just ignoring it and kicking the can down the road until it's inevitably going to rear its ugly face and stand in the way of what you really want to accomplish.
Okay. So it's kind of like writing down what you want to be. In a previous episode that I talked with a guest, he's like, you know, if you look at a chart on the top right, you put who you want to be, how you envision yourself, the best version of yourself and all that. And then you're essentially trying to map the dots on the graph, and you're going to have high points and have low points and all that stuff. But so he was saying, as you go through the dots on the way up to that top right, realize that just make every decision to try to get to the top right. But you're saying before you even start, think about what those low points may be, so you're more prepared to go around them.
Think about what's going to hit you towards those low points. So the minimizing of risk is always going to be part of the struggle. But if you pretend to not have them, or you pretend to ignore them, or you pretend just to not worry at the moment about the things that you know are going to stand in your way, that's when you start to get yourself into the weeds beyond what you could pull yourself out of by yourself. And so you're exactly right in terms of, if we have this master plan, if we have this grand vision, if you have an idea of what you think the best version of yourself, your company, your project looks like, that's great. You certainly want to start there.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to just start with whatever the liabilities are, whatever the risks are. That's no fun. You want to have a goal. And if you don't, then you want to dissect that into incremental goals. Like, all right, well, if I want to have this Ferrari, I understand it's going to need this amount of money, this amount of credit, this amount of understanding, this amount of the rest of my life not standing in the way. And so you got to figure out those things. But when you get to that, the rest of my life not standing in the way, that's what you really got to spend your time on, and saying, well, how do I quell those factors? How do I minimize their impact on the journey that I'm about to take?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. You have a lot going on. You've definitely navigated the business and very well, and creating the content and bringing. I think a lot of people can learn a lot from just how you've strategized and like been vulnerable, and at the same time open to, doing the videos and having that perspective, even though you didn't really see it that way starting out.
Right.
Because I think it's easy to get, as an entrepreneur, to get married to an idea, and then even like being passionate about the idea kind of gets in the way of doing things that help propel that idea forward, Yeah. And it's a difficult tightrope that I think a lot of entrepreneurs walk.
But that's the name of the game. Like when you look at why someone can enjoy whatever it is that makes their career path fitting.
Yeah.
If you're not ready for the uncertainty, if you're not ready to get slapped in the face by something you never expected to even exist, then entrepreneurship's probably not that great of an idea. But if you're ready to react, if you're ready to respond, and if you feel like you can be resilient enough to overcome those things, then it can be something that you're uniquely qualified for. And no goal, no path that I've ever set out and ended up achieving was an A to B function.
Yeah.
It was a zigzaggy, pothole filled road that eventually you figure out. And when you do, it's just as satisfying as you ever dreamt it could be in most cases, or at least that's what you hope. But you're going to learn a lot. You're going to build a resume. You're going to end up with putting the pieces together that all culminate in whatever the best version of you is.
Yeah. So can someone start a new app or a new tech company by themselves? I mean, you have partners, right?
Yeah.
You had several partners, and I have an app that I'm developing myself, but been in development for like the past 2 years, taking forever. But anyway, and Ray and I are partners in that, and I feel like there's power in just doing business by yourself. And even back in the day, before the pre-internet, you probably wanted to own the business outright yourself versus having several partners involved. I don't know if you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, but he always says, the only ship that won't sell is a partnership. But in this tech world, I find more and more that there is just almost every tech company is a partnership by several people. So can someone do a tech company by themselves?
The answer is absolutely, but. And the but there is you will make better decisions when you're forced to answer for them as early as possible. In a world where you act alone and you make your own decisions and you have this full autonomy with respect to whatever your project is, you're going to go fast, you're going to go hard, and you're going to be 100% behind it. But the blinders are going to exist whether you want to acknowledge them or not. There's going to be things about your idea, about the marketplace, and about how it fits there that you simply cannot anticipate. And the more people that you have close to you, whether they're advisors, partners, a captive test audience, whatever you want to use, and the more sensitive you are to their feedback, the better off you're going to be, and the faster you're going to be able to refine your idea. Because if we come out and say, all right, if you look at VINwiki and all the things it could be, all right, it can be like building a garage of cars. It can be taking pretty pictures of your cars. It can be building video content of your cars. It can be this. It can be a timeline. What you're going to do is you're going to say, all right, which of these features do we really need as our core functionality? And we're going to narrow our focus on those things. Now, if it was just me, it would be built exactly the way that I want to use the app. But I can't expect myself to be the most generic form of user. I am the most passionate form of user. Like I'm the guy that's going to hear that and immediately go, oh, I want this, and it. But if those don't all appeal to the whole audience that we have in front of us, then it doesn't necessarily make it easier to be successful. It might add to the product roadmap for 2025. But it doesn't make it any more or less it doesn't make it any more likely that we're going to end up closer to that outcome sooner.
I like that because it's sort of saying that your clients or your customers are your partnership in a way. You have to listen to them and adjust to them. That's really good. So let's say I'm a young entrepreneur. I have my idea for my app. What's next? What's the very first thing I should do after I come up with my app idea?
The first thing that you should do is find supportive enough and experienced enough people in the space that are willing to give you advice. Don't worry about them stealing your idea. Worry about them telling you why it won't work. Then, if for any reason, your first thing is, this idiot doesn't know what he's talking about. He don't know me and my passion. So get over that. Internalize what they've said. Figure out if and how you're going to overcome that, and refine the idea in the best version of itself, and then do the same thing over again. It's about figuring out the best way to pitch an idea to the people that are around that you need to be receptive to it. There's a guy, Kevin Sandlin, that runs a weekly meetup at Atlanta Tech Village called Pitch Practice. Okay. And he does it for free right after Startup Chow down at Tech Village every Friday. And if I weren't here, I'd be there right now. And
thank you.
Because I just love it, not necessarily for the chance to refine my own ideas. I've used it for that, but now I just love the chance to kind of give feedback and help people to find the best way to so efficiently present who they are, what they want to do, and exactly how they plan to do it. What problem are you solving? What is your solution? And what do you need right now?
Yeah.
And usually that first need is, I need people to come act as, unpaid, unincentivized advisors and just tell me what you legitimately think of my idea. Give me that feedback so I can refine it into something that when I need to pitch it to somebody for investment, for equity to build it, for whatever else that I need as a single person or small team entrepreneur. And then I want to be able to make the best first step in that direction.
So is it more important to get that feedback from fellow entrepreneurs that may not necessarily be your target audience, or to release beta versions to your audience and get feedback from them?
First, you want to get feedback from people who can give you good feedback on what it is as a business.
Okay.
If you want to create a game, put the game in front of people. Yeah. All right. Because that's what really matters. Are they going to enjoy it?
Yeah.
And then if they enjoy it, you can make a business out of anything people just love engaging with.
Yeah.
But for most businesses, it needs to have a business behind it. And so you need people to say, all right, at scale, this sells, or at scale, this creates this advertising or this impression opportunity or whatever it is, or that product has a purpose, solves a problem. People need that.
Yeah.
As you hear things like that, then you can become excited to say, all right, this is something I should spend time with prototyping. Then you prototype it, put it out there in the world, test it with a beta audience, and see what happens.
Yeah. So
sorry, I'm getting absolutely blown up.
Oh, no worries. No worries. Did you, and feel free to take it if you need to.
Let me just make sure. No, I think we're good.
Good. Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're good. And did, my question just slipped my mind.
Happened. Sorry.
Yeah, it happens. I totally forgot what I was going to say though.
So we were talking about the prototype after you've gotten the feedback.
Yeah.
And to me, that's key. Like it's very, now you can go out and get any of these MVP shops to build you a prototype app for 10 to 15 grand. Yeah. And if you give them the idea and some wireframes idea of what you want it to look and feel like, they can build it. Like it's not rocket science. You don't have to give them equity for that. Now, we iterated through 47 versions of the VINwiki app before we released it in the App Store, because I wanted to make sure that the obvious bumps in the road were all addressed with a 100-person test audience that we had kind of, handpicked.
And would your developer then have percentage in the business?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't always have to pay the developer. You can give them percentage.
Right. Because to build VINwiki to what it is would have probably been, depending on how you did it, $150,000 to $250,000.
Okay.
And to spend that before you can really get it out there to test was certainly not something I was in a position to do.
You couldn't really prove the concept before.
Exactly. I mean, you always want to look at what is the MVP, what is the minimally viable product or the version of what I'm trying to do at scale. Now, it's not going to be as pretty, it's not going to be as feature filled, but like if let's say I can hand you a notebook and say, write down everything you do to your car. All right. Now, hopefully I'm going to give you a better version that you can use your phone for and do all this stuff in that way. But if I don't, can I end up with, can you do it? Will you do it?
Yeah.
And so if there is a great way for you to do that, by all means do. Don't spend the money until you figured out like with the proposal to someone that should be interested in the concept, will they act?
Yeah.
And so we did some of that. Probably we could have done more. We had a pretty high confidence level just based on interviews and things like that of like, would you do this? Most of them said yes.
Yeah.
And so, but if I had to pay to have it built, I would have spent a lot more time in that.
Yeah. So did you raise any funding though for marketing or anything? No. Okay. Kind of off the heels of that, were you still working at the dealership when you started the app, or you went full time?
No, I'd had my fill of the dealership about a year before I ended up quitting it in end of October of 2015. I was ready to not be there. So I was always like, is this going to be the deal I quit over? Nah, not quite. And just kind of keep going. But no, I didn't know if I was going to do something more traditionally in the car business, if I was going to do something in another industry, or if it would be something entrepreneurial. I certainly did not expect it to be what it's become.
Yeah.
You never do. But I'm very pleased with where we're at now and excited about the road ahead.
So when you came up with the idea, you were able to spend like full time on it. You weren't having to do it as a side hustle as you worked another job.
Yeah, and I think that was a huge opportunity that I had. Fortunately, is we lived pretty cheap, and I live in a way that looks really expensive but isn't, because I own really cool cars that don't depreciate and don't cost any money. But it's good point. So I was in a position where I could afford a pretty long runway of not making money, and it ended up I did not think that I could have afforded to go as long as I did. I went about two and a half years without any income. And that's a tough place to be. Yeah. But it was behind an idea that I believed in and knew, could become something. But people want to go out and take the risks and take the jump. But, sometimes you don't realize how far the fall is before the parachute comes out.
Yeah.
And if you haven't prepared yourself for, I'd say, at least 1 to 2 years of it not working at all or nearly to its potential, you're going to either need to find a way to cushion that, and incubators and things like that can be awesome ways to do it. They give you a little bit of money and save you some expenses related to the company, but you give up equity.
Yeah.
And so, as you devise your equity strategy, that's always my advice, is just figure out what you can do to minimize your initial financial exposure and figure out the team that's really going to help you build it.
Yeah. But if you're okay to go down this route, I see you got the wedding ring on. So going 2.5 years without collecting a paycheck or bringing in any money, how taxing does that get on your relationship and family? And,
a lot.
I assume that's a huge pressure.
It is. And, fortunately, a lot of the decision to not work 80 hours a week in a car dealership was also based on my wife's desire. And we had a 1-year-old son at the time. So also a great time to not have any income is when you have a toddler running around. But fortunately that didn't work out as poorly as it could have.
Yeah.
And so she was on board with it. But at the same time, there is always going to be a tremendous amount of pain associated with the iteration and the development of a new idea. It's inevitable. If you don't encounter the resistance, the reasons not to, the problems that are inevitably going to happen, then you're not innovating enough. You're not in a space that can possibly reward you enough. And so that hurts a lot more than the risk. And I think as the spouse of someone who has entrepreneurial dreams or has the dream to do anything crazy, the pain you're going to see in them until the goal is realized is going to hurt a lot more than the fear you have in the uncertainty of whatever it's going to become. And I think the ability, almost in a masochistic sense, to accept the hardship, to accept the struggle, not the Instagram like hashtag struggle, but like the seriously like what on earth am I doing struggle. Like that's what's going to be hard on the people that care about you. And when they question what you're doing, it's not because they don't believe in you or the idea. They question whether or not what they see you experiencing is worth it. And what you have to say to them is not, it's going to work. What you have to say is, it's worth it right now for it to hurt this bad and to be this uncertain, because I believe in that much in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I understand that this goes with the territory of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's an incredible truth of entrepreneurship is you have to put up with what doesn't feel good right now to feel a little better later, right? I mean, sacrifice. I always say this: don't waste your sacrifices, because like as entrepreneurs and growing businesses, you know, you're going to sacrifice so much time and resources and money and relationships even, and you know, it would be a shame to just let all of those sacrifices go to waste and give up.
Right.
So the more time that I put in, and the more I hustle, the more I work, and the more I sacrifice, you know, my happy time, you know, whether that's watching football on Sunday or spending time with my dog and my wife, like, then the more I realize how much I'm sacrificing that time, the more I have the fight in me to just keep going and keep developing. And if it is starting from scratch, coming up with a new idea and adjusting,
right,
and all that, and really putting on that CMO hat, I think that's the most important thing is realizing that you have to play CMO before CEO. And that's true in almost every startup and every new business.
Yeah. And it's not just the CMO hat, it's all the darned hats.
Yeah.
I remember when we first got moved into our warehouse, and, you know, it was way too early to have like, you know, our own space or anything like that. But I had a bunch of cars. I needed some storage space. I just wanted it. So, but the rest of the guys come in there, the developers, and I'm covered in, you know, dirt and grime and paint, and trying to just make this into something that it wasn't. And I think you have to have that recognition that either I'm going to start writing some huge checks to make this into what I'd like it to look like, or I'm going to be the one breaking my back trying to make sure that every stone doesn't go unturned. Like I figure out what it is that we need as a team to give us the greatest chance of success.
Yeah.
And some of it's going to be reckless, some of it's going to be difficult, all of it's going to be painful. But at the end of the day, as long as you see where you're at with these dots along the map towards this end goal, that's how you know that you're headed in the right direction. And it's not up to everybody else to see that.
Yeah.
And so when you receive criticism or you receive counsel, advice, whatever it is, if it doesn't seem like you are the man, you are doing it, you are in it, just everything that you're doing right now is paying off and we all see it. Like you're not going to get that feedback, but you don't need it.
Yeah.
You need to know that I'm being careful, I'm making the right decisions in the moment that are not putting me further away, but they are putting me closer to whatever this end game is.
Yeah, even against all opposition and doubt from other people. Right?
Sure. Yeah. You know, you want to, whether or not you seem like you're taking it all in, you always want to make sure that you take whatever advice people are giving you, even if it seems uninformed, because they're not idiots. They're telling you something that you can use, that you at least need to be mindful of and have the right answer to, even if you don't spit it back in their face as soon as they ask you. You need to say, all right, he said this is what he really meant. This is what I understand that to mean. Like, this is where it puts me with respect to what I feel like I'm accomplishing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I don't think the customer is always right, but I think the customer is never wrong. If that makes sense, you know, there's something, they may not have the right answer or the right way they're putting it or the right request, or they may be misunderstanding something, but I think that's an education or a teaching moment to then inform that client or customer to the right decision, or, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, someone who's willing to pay you money merits your attention.
Exactly.
And even if what they say isn't the purest reflection of their objection or their concern, it is still most certainly something that you've got to have some sensitivity to. Yeah,
totally. Well, we're closing in at right about an hour, and this is you've given such good tips and statements just as for entrepreneurs as a whole. Before we get into where to follow you, is there anything else, like one last thing you would want to add, or thing you would want to give?
I appreciate the opportunity. It's been a good time.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. So where can people find you? Let's tag it up.
VINwiki in the App Store, VINwiki on YouTube, VINwiki.com, VINwiki on Twitter, VINwiki_official on Instagram until I get them to give me VINwiki that some guy hadn't used. One day.
How does that work? Do you have to offer to pay for it? Or?
No, if I could contact them, I guess that's how you do it. But I've sent in their little reform like that because you can't really say, it's not like domain squatting exactly, but so there's not a perfectly executed way to protest it.
True.
So who knows? But VINwiki official.
There's a new business idea that we're kind of developing, and I bought the domain name for it and the Facebook page and all that, but someone has the name on Instagram. No posts, 0 posts. They follow nobody. They just have the name. I was like, And I'm sure if I sent a message, they were not never.
They won't respond.
Yeah.
That was my experience as well. But
so maybe we'll figure it out one day.
The real idea.
The real, yeah. So it's VINwiki, VINwiki. Cool. All right. Thank you, Ed, so much for being here. Really good conversation.
My pleasure.